Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are on this planet. My name is Chase Jarvis, founder and CEO of CreativeLive. I am so excited for today's live event with a dear, dear friend of mine, Mr. Chris Guillebeau. We're coming at you live from remote locations amidst these crazy times, but we are going to really dive into Chris's new book and a handful of other things. If you're new to this channel or to Chris, I would love to tell you a little bit about him. Chris, in addition to being a dear friend and one of the first 100 teachers on CreativeLive, Chris is a writer of numerous guides of travel and small business, otherwise living a non-conventional life, which we respect and admire a lot here at CreativeLive. He's a world-class speaker where he talks about many of these same topics all over the stages across the globe. He's the holder of numerous world records, some of which I've had the good fortune of participating in with him, including being the youngest person ever to travel to all 193 countries around the world. He is, last but not least, a renowned best-selling author of numerous books, including The $100 Startup, The Art of Nonconformity, Happiness of Pursuit, 100 Side Hustles, Born for This, and his newest book, which we're here to talk about today, The Money Tree. And in today's event, we're going to basically follow the structure of a 3-act play. The first act is going to be Chris giving us an amazing keynote presentation covering so many topics of the book and things that he's been thinking about during these interesting times, the role that money and the opportunities that are available to us play in our lives. The second act, Chris and I are going to be in conversation, entertaining a lot of these topics. And then in the third act, we're going to be taking your questions live from everywhere around the planet. And the way that you can participate in those questions is depending on where you're watching this. If you're on Chris's class page here at CreativeLive, or if you're watching at creativelive.com/TV, you can go up in the upper right-hand corner and click the chat button, and that'll open up a window, and you can ask your questions there. Myself and a couple of our team here at CreativeLive are monitoring that. And of course, if you're watching via Facebook or YouTube Live, you can just chat some questions there in the comments, and I will get those. Of course, we're not going to be able to get to all the questions, but please don't hesitate at all to ask those questions. We're going to get to as many as we can in that third act of the 3-act play. So now the moment you've been waiting for, a global book tour debut here on the internet. It gives me huge pleasure to introduce a dear friend and your guide today, and in lots of other ways, a guide to many of us across our lives, Mr. Chris Guillebeau. Take it away, Chris.
Chase, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chase Jarvis, CreativeLive. Hello, Internet. I'm so happy to be here. So excited to have the chance to come on one of my favorite platforms with my favorite people and talk about the money tree, but also talk about some broader concepts that I think are very, very relevant to this time that we're all in. I think when we look ahead, we go ahead 6 months from now, a year from now, multiple years from now, whatever the time frame is, we're all going to be able to look back and remember this time. Like, it's not going to be something that we forget, right, for all kinds of reasons. And something that I've been thinking about for myself is, what do I want to remember during this time? Because some of those things are already kind of set, right? That's just based on history, on current events, and so on. But I want to be able to look back and say, okay, well, all these things were happening, and in lots of ways it was really crazy, but I did something during this time. I made something. I'm able to look back and say, like, I had a goal, or I made a change or a shift in my life, and I think actually a lot of people are going to make tremendous shifts during this time. So that's my encouragement to you just as we start here. As we look ahead, how do we want to see this time in history when we're looking back on it later? So I'm here, as Chase said, to do the virtual book launch of my book, The Money Tree. I was supposed to go to 40 cities. I was going to do a book tour all across North America and then eventually beyond. But now I'm going to 0 cities. So, of course, I've had to change and make adjustments along with everybody else. But I'm very grateful for the chance to speak to people all over the world here. So we'll talk a little bit about the book, but I just want to kind of acknowledge reality and kind of focus, even more on this concept of, first the reality, we're in this world that has been turned upside down. A lot of people are anxious, rightfully so. A lot of people are concerned and worried. A lot of the things that we have believed to be true, perhaps we're realizing are not true. A lot of expectations we've had, a lot of assumptions we've had. There's just so many changes, right? So many disruptions. And the interesting thing is we've never experienced anything like this before. in human history, but we're going through it together now. So whatever like global events have happened before, we didn't have the connectivity that we do now. So now everybody's doing all kinds of online meetings. We're all watching CreativeLive and connecting with people in different places without being able to connect physically. So it's kind of interesting because just as an analogy, I'm here in this studio and Chase is in another studio. So I'm in a room, with some cameras, but it's kind of isolating because nobody else is here. But at the same time, I know that a lot of people are here in a way, because I know that you're watching from wherever you are, in your couch, your office, on the go perhaps. So this is kind of like what life is like now in lots of ways. Like we're isolated, but we're also together. What do we do? What do you do? What do I do when everything around you changes? Like when you realize that these things that you have believed in, or these things that you have relied upon, perhaps, are not true now, or just something that you can't rely on. Or, as I said, so much has changed. So I really believe, and this is something I've been focusing on a lot, we'll talk about it here today, uncertainty and opportunity often come together. Like whenever there's progress, there are some negative effects. Whenever there is disruption, there are some positive effects. So the question is where is the opportunity? How can we find that? And one thing I really know is that a lot of things are outside of our control. In fact, so many things are outside of our control. I don't have to tell you that, right? But if we focus on what we can influence, then I think that is the key to being able to look back on this time and say, I did everything I could to be safe, to take care of myself, to check up on people that I loved. Maybe I kind of reoriented a bit in that way. But, as I said earlier, I also did something for myself. I made a change, and I found that opportunity for myself, one perhaps, that I wouldn't have found otherwise. So that's my goal to talk with you about here today. I very much look forward to the interactive portion, as Chase mentioned. So our agenda for this presentation, this part of it, I'm going to talk about the student loan crisis, something that was scary before all of this current situation began to occur. I think it's very relevant now, even if you don't have student loans, if you don't have student debt. I think it's relevant to a lot of people. I'm going to talk about a new model of earning extra income, so that if you're facing financial pressure of any kind, you can learn a new way of doing that. Essentially, I'm going to talk about the first way, the second way, and importantly, the third way. And then as part of that, I'm going to give you 14 pretty quick examples of real projects. Okay, so people that are using this model. And if you have listened to Side Hustle School or followed some of my other work, some of these stories might be familiar to you. You might hear an update or a bit of a refresh on them. So let's dive in. Let's talk about something scary that isn't what everybody else is talking about 99% of the time. So when I first started working on this book, I was thinking a bit about this problem of how every spring and summer, more than 2 million students just in the US alone will graduate with a 4-year diploma. It's actually 4 million students graduating, including associate degrees and such. Obviously, people elsewhere graduating around the world. And especially in North America, 70% of them will have significant student loan debt. 70% of them have debt of more than $10,000. The average is something like $30,000. And of course, a lot of people have much more than that. Now, historically, there's been this bargain where we go to school, we choose to invest, maybe take on debt, we spend a certain amount of time, years, et cetera. But in the end, we're going to get a high-paying job. We're going to enter, a career in which we will have job security and so on. Well, we all know that's really not the case for so many people these days. And the cost of education has outpaced inflation while providing lower returns, which has created a generational wealth gap, so that millennials are now much poorer off than preceding generations. This is either the first time in history this has happened, or it's certainly the first time in a very long time. So those are just a few statistics. I don't need to tell you any more about that because you already know what a problem is. And just in case you forgot, because I know you didn't, all of this is taking place in an uncertain time. Okay, so we have all these things going on. And if you don't have that problem of student debt, if you don't know somebody that does, which you probably do, then any kind of financial pressure, if you have lost your job, if you are underemployed now, like so many people are, or even if you still have a good job, but you're a little bit worried and afraid, rightfully so, then you are facing that kind of situation of insecurity, of uncertainty, of okay, what do I do? What can I do about this? So that's what we're going to talk about here, solutions, practical responses. And speaking of responses, I want to show you a couple of ways that we tend to respond to this problem. When we're feeling financial pressure, there's a couple ways that we tend to respond. One of those ways is we get mad. Okay, we get really mad, and the object of our wrath, tends to vary. It might be we're upset at another generation. Like, why did you leave us in this place? We're mad at the government. We're mad at corporate America. It could be a political system. We're upset with capitalism. We're upset with socialism. Something in between. Whatever it is, we get really mad. So here's the thing. It's not that there is nothing in the world to be upset about. It's not that any of these parties are innocent. It's not that there's not a place for righteous anger. The problem is that after you're mad, you're still in the same situation you were before. Like, your fundamental situation isn't changed. So getting mad actually doesn't solve the problem. The other thing that we tend to do when we're in this state of anxiety or even panic or desperation for some people, we embrace extreme frugality. And we're like, I can't spend any money at all. I need to stop buying my coffee. And if I deposit that $4 I was going to spend on my coffee, then 10 years from now I'll be able to buy a coffee maker, and I can make my coffee at home, and then I can deposit another $4 in 40 years if I don't get hit by a bus. Maybe that will contribute to some retirement. Again, some point in the distant future, right? So that's not really going to solve the immediate problem. That's not really going to help you be better off. Maybe eventually one day, but very, very far in the future. So I believe those are the responses that we tend to gravitate towards. But if you have this problem, whether it is student loan debt, whether it's another kind of debt, whether it is unemployment, underemployment, the lack of job security, just feeling that your choices are limited because of finances, this is the only real solution. This is what you need to do. You need to actually increase your income. Not just, cut back on the coffee, not just get mad. You need to increase your income, and it's a two-part process because you want to increase your income and decrease your dependency. At this point, you're realizing maybe some of the things that we've depended on before are not actually that reliable. Job security is really not a thing. So how can I lessen my dependence on external parties? How can I create more security for myself? And I've been talking a bit about money. The new book is called The Money Tree, right? And I've been thinking a lot about it because I'm the first to say that money is a tool, right? Money is a resource. Money is it's not about pursuing money for the sake of money. It's just about what you can exchange, that money for, and so on. Ultimately, we're all interested in life purpose and life meaning. How can we, live a fulfilling life? How can we contribute, to other people's lives? How can we be of service and such? But at the same time, this whole thing about why are you focusing on money? The people who tend to say things like, well, money doesn't matter or money isn't important, those people tend to have money. Do you know what I mean? Those people actually tend to have enough. And I have never heard, in all the emails I get and communication I get, I have never heard someone write in and say, I just lost my job. Please stop talking about making money. So I want you to understand, if you're in a situation where you are okay right now, then that's great. But millions of people are not. And so when you're in debt, this is the key point, many of your choices are made for you. You have these limitations, you have these constraints. All of us now are experiencing all sorts of limitations and constraints on our ability to live daily life, our ability to travel, how we interact with people and such. Well, if you are in this situation of crippling debt or some other financial pressure, that is your situation all the time. Right? You always have these limitations and constraints, not the same ones necessarily, but you're always living in this world in which you have something imposed upon you. And so it is crippling, as I said. Money's not everything, but if you don't have it, your life is very different. So if you accept this principle, if you're like, okay, can't just, get mad, can't just save money, how do I actually do that? How do I increase my income? And here, once again, we have a couple of responses that we tend to gravitate toward, right? Because this is what we're told to do, and this is what we see other people trying to do. And one of those things is we're just going to work harder, right? We're either going to work harder in our job or try to get a different job, and just try to do a better job and get ahead somehow. Nothing wrong with working harder, but if you have $50,000 worth of debt, that's not necessarily going to help. The other thing, which has been marketed to us very well by large corporations, is go and join the gig economy. Okay, go and join the gig economy, which really is just a set of glorified part-time jobs. It's a set of opportunities to go and make small amounts of money. And there is some benefit, to being able to set your own schedule and to have, some amount of choice there. But there's also a great deal of limitations, right? And if entrepreneurship is about freedom, or being able to be free of financial pressure is about freedom, what kind of freedom is it if someone else makes all the decisions? Because with all of these platforms, all these opportunities in the gig economy, you think you have some choice, but there are a tremendous amount of limitations. These companies control the amount of competition in your area. They control your compensation effectively. If they don't like you, then they kick you off the platform. So again, what kind of freedom is it if somebody else is deciding everything? Nothing at all wrong with having a part-time job. Just to be clear, like in our lives, most of us have done things like deliver pizza, or like I did that when I was young. I worked in a warehouse, like putting boxes on a truck. But that's not what we want to do for the rest of our lives. And if you really want to get ahead, if you are experiencing that pressure, you have to do something different. So those are the solutions that other people propose. Those are what we tend to gravitate towards. I want to propose something different. And Chase was very kind to say some nice things about me in the beginning. I'll just say a couple things. I've spent my entire life, for better or worse, questioning authority, looking for alternative solutions, and I have always worked for myself. This is the definition, I'll let you read this, of entrepreneur that I have always kind of gravitated toward myself. Someone who will work 24 hours a day for themselves to avoid working 1 hour a day for someone else. I'm not saying this is the model everyone should follow. To be clear, a lot of people that I featured on my podcast or in my books, a lot of my community, have regular jobs. They have families and responsibilities. They have this thing called life-work balance, et cetera. So I'm not trying to say that everybody else needs to, work all the time or whatever. But for me, I've just been very motivated, to start different projects and to explore, as I said, different solutions and alternatives. And my overall mission is to help people make their own choices and become self-reliant. And I've done that for 11 years now with this project I have called The Art of Nonconformity, which my overall mission is, or life statement, I would say, is you don't have to live your life the way others expect. There are all kinds of expectations that people will put on you. There are all kinds of assumptions. There are all kinds of traditional paths that are laid out for you to follow. And you don't have to adhere to those expectations or assumptions or follow those paths. There could be something else better for you. It doesn't mean that everyone is lying to you about everything. It doesn't mean this is not like the Matrix, everything you've heard is untrue. But a lot of what you have heard may not be true for you. And that's the whole point. Or it may not be true for you at this time in your life, at this season in history. Another thing I really believe is that nobody will care about your well-being as much as you do. So even though there are good jobs, there are good companies, it's not like I completely mistrust, every organization or large structure. Nobody's going to care about you getting ahead, you having more security the way that you do, or the way that you need to. So what I want to talk about here is the solution called the third way. And this is the model that I've developed in this new book, The Money Tree, a story about finding the fortune in your own backyard. And this book is essentially telling the story of a young guy named Jake who has a pretty good job, a decent job at least, and he is a hard worker, but he's really struggling, like so many people. And he had a lot of student loan debt, and this debt is affecting every part of his life. It's affecting his relationship. It's affecting his day job performance. He's getting evicted from his apartment. All this kind of stuff is happening. And what happens in life sometimes is all the pressures arrive at once, right? It's like you have one thing and you're like, I'm dealing with this, and then something else, comes along, and it's like this piling on effect. And so he's trying to figure out, what can I do? How can I get out of this situation? And he, first tries, to just work harder, and he considers, becoming a rideshare driver, but realizes, that's not actually going to solve the problem effectively. So, he ends up going to a group where everybody's in this situation or similar situation of trying to create something for themselves, and they're all trying to do it without spending a lot of money or taking a lot of risk, which I'll come back to. So I mentioned the third way. What's the first way and the second way? The first way of starting a business, if you go back traditionally, when I was young, I thought about, really young, as a kid, I thought about one day I want to own a business, and I was always thinking about it's going to be like a retail store. Or I don't know if I was thinking about a coffee shop then, but this is like the classical model, mom and pop store, right? You're going to open the dry cleaner or whatever. And that requires capital, one way or another. You usually have to borrow money, whether it's from the bank or from your parents or from your own savings, some other source. It involves risk, like it might work out, but it might not. And if it fails, there are pretty significant consequences. And there's also a long time frame to it, for all these kinds of businesses. Like it's going to take a while before you know if it's working or not. And you could, end up spending years on a project that ultimately fails. The second way is the way of the startup world. So this is like, every company in San Francisco or Tel Aviv or Berlin or wherever making an app, or doing something that also requires capital. It also involves risk. Lots of things can go wrong. And to obtain that capital, you usually need to have connections, which is another asset, essentially. You need to have the right connections, the right relationships. You need to know people. And so these two models are often presented as opposites, like, oh, you got your retail store, and this is the new way of the startup world. But think about this. What do these approaches have in common? And there's an obvious answer. Both of them are dependent on other people. Both of them are dependent on somebody else, some other person or party, to come along and kind of bestow permission in the form of funding, usually. But it's dependent on some other circumstance, which if you think about, is really another way of saying both of them are dependent on something outside your control. And when I started a few minutes ago, I was like, right now there's a lot of stuff outside of our control. What is within our control? Don't we want to maximize what is within our control so that we're not dependent on external events? Or less dependent, let's say. We're less dependent on external events. We're less dependent on externalities, for our security. So first way, second way, and I'm proposing the solution is the third way. The third way is about real people. It's about people like Jake in the book. It's about maybe like somebody watching right now who has found a way to, they didn't always identify as like a capital E entrepreneur, but they found a way to start a little project that makes money. And this project makes money. It becomes an asset for them. They do so without, going into debt, spending a ton of money. This whole thing about how you have to spend money to make money, I don't believe that. I think the time to invest in your business is when your business is taking off, not when it's getting started. So these are real people using a skill that they already have, finding a way to transform or adapt that skill to this new economy that we're all finding ourselves in. So about 10 years ago, I published a book called The $100 Startup, which was kind of the story of accidental entrepreneurs, or again, just people across middle America, elsewhere, not always in tech centers, who had found a way, to follow their passion, follow their skill, usually together, follow a passion and a skill, and create something monetizable with it through the knowledge that they had, the expertise that they had, through something that they had learned, whether in education or in a job or just through a hobby. And I started telling these people stories because I felt like nobody really was. I felt like there were lots of stories about people like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk now, and very few stories about relatable people who, as I said, didn't have access, to a lot of capital or resources. And then 3 years ago, I started this project, a podcast called Side Hustle School, which I've been doing every day since January 1, 2017. And when I started, I was worried that I would run out of examples because, every day I'm telling a different story, answering listener questions. Again, just looking at somebody and saying here's the path that they followed, here's the idea that they had, here's what happened along the way. Well, I'm 1,200 episodes in and counting and not running out of stories at all. So before we go to a more interactive portion or before I have a conversation with Chase, I thought I would just quickly tell you a few of these stories. One of the ones I really liked recently was a guy whose name was Dan, and he was a line cook in St. Louis, kind of working in the middle of the night, making pancakes and eggs for people who came in. And whenever the diner wasn't busy, he would, devote his time to making pancake art. And if he had a customer come in, he had a little bit more time, he would make their pancake, in the shape of some cartoon character or something fun. He just noticed that he got more tips, when he did that. And so he started getting really good at it. And a friend came along and said, hey, will you actually come to an event? I don't know if it was a birthday party or something else. Will you come to an event and do your art? And so he did. And from there, the two of them decided to actually make this a business. Well, about 3 years in, they were traveling all over the world. And like they were in Dubai last year, a bunch of other places. Obviously, they're not traveling as much now, but they built this business to multiple six figures. So this is a guy who is, again, a diner cook, in a random diner in Missouri, and now he and his partner are making six figures from a pretty basic skill, right? But a lot of people can make pancakes. He found a way to kind of level it up. So that's Dan Cakes. You can check him out online. Here's another image of one of their creations. It's really elaborate. This guy, Victor de la Flor, is a U.S. Marine who crushed his sunglasses like we have all done at different times, like end up sitting on them or something. And he did it one time too many, and he was like, I keep doing this. I buy nice sunglasses, and then I end up ruining them. And as a Marine, he had to wear a hat. And so he created this really, really simple product, very simple, like practical product that's providing a solution to a real problem, a 3D printed clip, to secure your sunglasses under a hat. He did so, just kind of bootstrapped, right? Just kind of DIY figuring it out. Well, when I featured him last, he had nearly matched his salary as a Marine with this side hustle, right? So he's still, in service, but he's also earning this extra income, which, as I said, is quite substantial. So he has options going forward. Maybe he'll go more into this, or maybe he'll just continue earning that extra money to prevent debt, to build security for his future. One more here. I told this story on my last book tour, but I like it so much I keep coming back to it. This woman in Washington, D.C., Danielle Fang, she was a volunteer going to in-person classes, teaching immigrants or tutoring immigrants who were studying to take the U.S. citizenship test. Now, this test is hard. If you are a U.S. citizen, if you were born in the States, you might have a hard time passing it. So you have to have a lot of specific knowledge. So people really have to study for it. And so one day she started uploading her tutorials to YouTube, and more people started watching. And then after she had enough of an audience, YouTube began putting some ads on those videos, and she gets a portion of that revenue. So anyway, now she has built this business. It's like a service, like she's helping people, but it's also for profit for her. When I last talked to her, she was making something like $4,000 to $5,000 a month from this, and hundreds of thousands of people are watching these tutorials. And I love this model because she is doing something that she used to do for free, like she was a volunteer. And now she's compensated for it. She's also reaching a lot more people than she ever would otherwise. And the people who are benefiting from this work she does don't pay anything for it because of the model of Google and YouTube, right? So lots of examples like this, lots of ways that people have found something that they know about or solved a common problem like the last guy I mentioned. As I said, 1,200 episodes and counting. Keep finding stories. I keep finding more and more. I'm just going to give you a quick little overview here, a quick little rundown of a whole bunch of others. I'll go really quickly. And all of these are real businesses. So it's not like somebody has an idea. These are all profitable businesses that I've featured in just the past 3 months. Somebody was doing accent training. Somebody was doing custom confetti. Talked to a woman who was a belly dance instructor. And now she's doing online belly dancing tutorials and like belly dancing virtual bundles, actually doing pretty well with it. A guy who's made $250,000 doing drone repairs, which I think is really interesting because here's a statistic. Approximately 100% of drone owners will crash their drone. So it's a big market, fixing people's drones these days. I talked to a New Zealand teenager who was importing speed cubes, which are kind of like Rubik's cubes, but there's a whole like subculture hobby of this. So he started importing them from China and Australia. Now he's like the main guy in New Zealand selling these, earning a good income from it. A woman who's doing photography sessions focused on your Tinder profile, really specific market, but a lot of people who need to improve their dating profile photos. If you're not into that, there's another woman who is doing dog portraits. Right, so online dating portraits, dog portraits, again, profitable business. A guy whose passion, because everybody's got a thing, his passion was carnivorous plants, and was really into they got the Venus flytrap, but apparently there's a whole lot of others. Like the Venus flytrap is kind of a stereotype in the carnivorous plant world. So he decided to build the Wikipedia of these plants effectively, and created a little exchange where people can buy and sell and trade, and he earns a commission. On all these trades. So I like that example because it shows sometimes the more random or the more narrow the topic, the better. And I pull these examples out because people are always like, well, I don't know anything that other people would be interested in paying for. I'm like, oh, yes, you do. I'm sure you do, and I bet we can figure it out if we just talk it through. What else did I want to mention here? Let's see. Oh, rent the chicken. That's right. In case you have always wanted to bring a chicken into your home, but weren't sure if you're ready for a lifelong commitment, you can now foster a chicken through a for-profit service where somebody's actually doing pretty well for themselves. So you can check that out if you're interested. And these are not anomalies. You can see there's like so many different topics, so many different things that can be done. And one of my favorite things is to kind of talk with people who think that they don't have a marketable skill, and try to show them an example. And I like to teach through examples because it kind of destroys the excuses. It kind of is like, well, there's nothing I can do. Well, all these people were able to do it. Well, I don't have any money. Well, a lot of people don't have money, and they're able to do it. So let's find some relatable project, and let's see what you can do. I'm going to tell you one more. I really liked working on this story. I called it The Rise and Fall of birdsupplies.com, which you can go there if you want, but we might all crash the website if we visit at once. So the woman who's been running this site, she's actually had it for a long time. I forget how many years, more than 10 years, might be 15 years or more. And when she first started this site, she was the go-to spot, the source on the internet for, well, it's a spoiler, bird supplies. And she did really well with that for a while. But then I think she actually made like 6 figures from it. But then she became the victim of an algorithm change by Google, which is a whole other thing, a whole business lesson we could talk about there. The point is her income greatly dropped. And then she found a way to kind of reinvent herself. And she decided to focus specifically on parrots, not just all birds, but parrots. And apparently, parrots have a lot of behavioral issues. So she began writing ebooks, a series of ebooks specifically addressing parrot behavioral issues. These are all real products. Is your screaming parrot driving you nuts? A couple of examples here. Do parrots have emotions? This parrot is longing to go home to Canada, I believe. As she went along, she improved her design. So you got why parrots pluck their feathers. And then the perennial bestseller here, Why is My Parrot Biting Me? So all of these ebooks sell every day, hundreds of dollars in sales. It's about a 95% profit margin when you're selling something like this. So again, very hyper-specialized topic. And about that profit margin, by the way, in my great wisdom as a traditional author, I earn about 14% from my books. So she's doing, as I said, 90 to 95% profit margin. Kind of inspired me actually because in this time I have to also, be willing to change and adjust and adapt. And so I wanted to do something special here for CreativeLive. In addition to talking about the money tree, thought I would give you just a special sneak peek of my book that's coming out in the fall, Feather Plucking for Fun and Profit, Get Rich or Die Flying. So you can pre-order that at a certain point, but first focus on the money tree. So the whole point, this is possible. This is possible. There are a lot of people doing it. There's a way that you can do it too. There is something that you can do if you've never thought of yourself as, being a business owner, entrepreneur. That's not what it's about. It's about creating freedom. It's about creating freedom for yourself, for your family perhaps, for your future, in this world of uncertainty. That's what it's all about. So here's one quick minute about the book, maybe 90 seconds, let's say, and then I'll have a conversation with Chase and then take whatever questions you have. My one request is, I'm trying to get this out to as many people as possible, both in terms of the book, just because it's a weird time to debut a book. 99% of the media attention in the world is focused on a single topic right now, so it's kind of hard to break through. I was supposed to do the 40-city tour. Now I'm not. I really want to reach people with the book, but more important is I hope the book is actually going to help people, and I want to help people in this situation of financial pressure. So a couple things we can do. I've got something coming out that's not ready just yet, but I will announce it here for the first time, more than just my new ebook. We're creating an online book registry, the world's first blockchain-enabled online book registry to allow people, two groups of people, to come to the site at moneytreebook.com. If you are experiencing any financial pressure, if you have lost your job, if you have significant debt, or you're just worried, because a lot of people are, then you can put your name down to receive a free copy of the book. And then anybody else who would like to be a donor, be a book donor, can come and purchase 1 copy, 5 copies, 10 copies, whatever, for any of those people. And you can purchase them for someone you know or for a stranger. And if people choose to opt in, then we're going to have a way to share their information, so you can actually get to know the person who you've given books to or have received a book from. There's post online with the hashtag moneytreebook.com. So as I said, that registry is not ready yet, but it will be shortly. And I will also be contributing to it, by the way. I will be contributing my author royalties, such as they are, for the first 3 months, everything that comes through this process to Teach for America and another organization that we haven't announced yet. But 100% of my profits will be going to that. And I'm also going to be investing in buying copies of my book for people who need them, which is kind of backwards now that I think about it. So I really should listen to my podcast at some point. But the point is, I really am invested with this book and this message, and I want to help people, navigate this time so that we can come out of it and be better than we were before. That we can come out of it saying like, wow, that time sucked in lots of ways, but yet it also kind of enabled me or nudged me or pushed me towards something that I wouldn't have discovered otherwise. That is my hope for so many people out there. I really believe, as I said, we're going to see lots of transformational shifts. So as I wrap up here, I wanted to share something with, this is the last thing, like if you only remember one thing from our time together, I thought about asking, to pop your answer to this in the chat, and if you have your answer already, you can do that. But this is like a more complicated question than like, what did you eat for breakfast today? So I totally understand if you don't have an immediate answer to this question and you want to think about it for a while. The question is, what is your life motto in 4 words? And the reason I bring this up is because I realized recently what mine was, which I'll share with you here. And when I kind of encapsulated it, I was like, oh yeah, this is how I've been living my life this is how I've been living my whole life, but I never had a way to just codify it like this. And so my answer, what I wanted to share with you is, like, whatever you're going through, whatever you're experiencing, whatever path you're on, whatever you're trying to figure out, my 4-word, life motto is, there is another way. There is a conventional path. There is the path that you know about. There is, the path and the options that people have presented to you or shared with you. There, are all the things that you were supposed to do or expected to do or assumed to do. And all those things are fine. It's not like, as I said, they're all a lie or they're all wrong or bad. I just want you to know that there is another way. There really is. And when we're in this time now, this time of uncertainty, anxiety, there is another way. There is a way through, right? If you are experiencing that pressure, if you are like, man, I don't know what to do next, short term, long term, like I don't have every single answer for you. Part of the value of self-reliance is like, let's all figure it out together. But there really is another way. So I hope, as I said at the beginning, that we can all come through this, look back and say, all right, I'm better now than I was before. And I want to do everything I can to support people in that. So this slide says thank you, which I think reminds me that I should say thank you to Chase, thank you to the CreativeLive team, and thank you to everybody out there who is watching from wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
There's like a standing ovation here in this, this room. I'm just imagining it.
Amazing, man. Thank you so much for that. And as you were thanking people, we literally have people from all over the world. We've got people from Scandinavia, people from South Africa. I see some Europe. We've got the full gamut here. So
Awesome.
Thank you so much for reaching such a diverse and inclusive audience. We've been friends for a long time. And one of the questions I'm seeing in the chat, and one of the questions that I had, if you remember, we sat down over an Italian meal the last time you were in Seattle, when we could actually be within 6 feet of each other,
Right.
And breaking bread. And we were talking about the money tree. And one of the questions that I have that I know is true for others is, this is a fiction book that you've written here,
right.
and you've embedded these lessons in a story. So what made you take that route, and how much fun or extra hard work was it? Two-part question.
It was extra fun and extra hard work. It was both. I got the idea at some point. I don't remember exactly what the origin was, but I started thinking about a story, right? And it is a story. I'm trying to teach through storytelling. My hope is that people will read this book who might not read, a how-to book or a business book, but who need this information, right? It's not just information, right? They need a path. They need they need to believe in themselves, and they need to understand that this world is accessible to them, because they've never thought of themselves, as going down that entrepreneurial path. And so often stories are far more effective, than a how-to book. and they're often more memorable. Like you can remember a lot of stories more easily than you can remember like a 6-step checklist. And so I started thinking about that main character, Jake, and I spent maybe 3 months just kind of outlining some ideas before I wrote anything, outlining ideas, thinking through characters, thinking through plot, and just really trying to hone it and make it really sharp. And then I wrote the whole book before I ever showed my agent or my editor, which normally in nonfiction publishing, you write a little proposal, like here's what the book's going to be about, then you go away and actually write the book. So I did it the other way around. I wanted to actually, first prove to myself that I could do this, write something that I felt that was high quality. And then just then kind of say, okay, here it is. Like, what do you guys think? And I was very happy that that people really believed in it at the publishing side. But yes, it was a lot of fun because I hadn't done it before, and it was also a lot of work. I think I wrote maybe 7 or 8 drafts of this book, and normally I'll write about 3 drafts, maybe 4 drafts. So I put a lot into it. So I think there are lessons. I think you can read it and be entertained and be inspired, but hopefully you'll also kind of go away with a sense of here's what I can do next in my life.
Well, I found it incredibly inspirational as someone who's written a book and knows how hard it is.
Right.
And finished this book. The storytelling was amazing. But there's a little meta lesson that I found in there, which is you took a risk in putting this out there in a new format, new to you, and that is so much about what you speak about, what you write about, is people taking risks to tap into whatever it is their passion. It's just getting started doing something instead of nothing. That's a huge theme in the book. So is this a process of taking your own medicine?
Absolutely. I mean, it is a bit of a risk creatively, and in the publishing world, just like any industry, it's like once you get on a certain track, that's the track you're supposed to stay on, and you can achieve a certain amount of success as long as you're on that track. But there's no guarantee if you jump tracks, you're going to be successful. But for me, it's not about success, quote unquote success. It's about meaning and purpose, doing something that I believe in, creative work. Obviously, anybody watching CreativeLive believes in that value. And I just feel it's needed, and so I hope the book sells well. Like I want my books to do well, but ultimately I want it to reach the right people. So whether it's a risk or not, it's something that I'm very happy to do.
So let's talk about the third way, and you recounted in your prezo, ways 1 and 2. Do you feel like the third way is it the future? Is it just by the title itself, like the third way, it means it's another way.
Right.
But is that more what the future is going to look like? I mean, let's just to be super blunt.
Sure.
We're entering a time where we can't go back to a lot of things the way they used to be. Some form of sort of normalcy will return, but we've shifted gears and we're onto a completely different universe. So is the third way a growing part of the future, or because we've been hit with this pandemic is going to scare people away?
Yeah, I'm glad you said what you just mentioned about how we're not going to go back, to the way things were. I think that's really important to stress. And a lot of industries are not going to be the same. A lot of jobs are not going to be the same. And so, if you're in a situation like that, I think the wrong thing to do. If you're in an industry that has taken a market decline, the wrong thing to do is to just kind of wait it out, right? The wrong thing to do is like fight reality and wait it out. I talked to somebody the other day who is a flight attendant, and he asked me, he's like, when do you think travel is going to pick up again? And I'm like, just to be honest with you, I think it's going to be a long time. I think it's going to be a very long time. I think it's not going to be the same. And if anybody tells you that, it's going to be okay, and what you should be doing right now is putting your flight attendant resume on LinkedIn and contacting other airlines, I think they're just trying to make you feel better. Yeah. So you need to understand, like, it's going to be different, as you said, Chase. And then, as for the third way, well, I think it's both the present and the future, and in some ways it's the past. Like, I like to always be clear when I talk about this kind of stuff. We often present entrepreneurial models from a very Western perspective. And I've spent, a lot of time traveling the world, going to some really poor countries, lived in a number of poor countries before, in Liberia and Sierra Leone, on a hospital ship in West Africa. And in those countries, the majority of countries in the world, in fact, if you kind of go out of the city and you go into the village, everybody has a micro entrepreneurial project. Every person there is side hustling and buying and selling and trading, and this kind of commerce has existed since commerce has existed since the beginning of time, or since people were buying and selling. So the reason I say that is because this has been happening a long time in lots of different parts of the world. What's different now is access to networks, connectivity, globalization, e-commerce becoming mainstream. Just the idea of people being able to do this, is now mainstream, which is good. Like the joke I tell, which is true. My parents are probably watching. Hey, Mom, 20 years ago when I was working for myself, as I've always worked for myself, I was 19 and starting to sell things online with eBay. I didn't know anybody else who was doing this. I couldn't go to a coffee shop and see somebody else, there working on their consulting business. And so I think my parents were kind of worried about me. I think they were kind of like, we know Chris is doing something on the internet, but we hope it's not bad. We hope it's not drugs or porn, and I was like, there's more than two industries, on the internet, just so you know. But now nobody thinks that way, because in every coffee shop, or, if you can't go to coffee shop now, everywhere people are starting their own little website. They've got their stuff, so that's what's different. And is it the future where more people create their own dependence and security and, can point to an external source of income like the U.S. Marine that I mentioned? It's not like he doesn't have a fulfilling job. He's doing this in addition to that. I hope that more people, will do that, because it just makes their life better.
Amazing. So I finished the book this morning. And I specifically saved the last 40 pages for, I was fortunate enough to get an advance copy. Thank you so much for getting me one of those. And just so it was extra fresh for me. And I couldn't help but go back, and I've got a lot of dog-eared pages here. But one of the things that, I happen to know you personally and have for a decade or so, and that's I'm grateful for that. But I also saw things that I was weaving in my mind, there's an autobiographical sensibility here, and I don't think that it's certainly not a one-to-one. But how much of the book did you feel like you layered in there intentionally? And I'm guessing, as your friend, that there's some stuff that maybe it was unintentional,
Sure.
but of course I'm just presuming. So
Sure.
just talk about the how personal some of the writing was for you.
I mean, it was very personal because of the nature of it being fiction. It's not that I said that the main character, Jake, or any other character, is based on me. I think I can see parts of myself in all the characters. I mean, there's a character who's not very nice as well, and I can see parts of myself in that guy, to be honest, right? To be fair. So it's not meant to be, autobiographical in that sense, but one of the things that Jake has to do in the beginning is his mentor Clarence challenges him to make $1,000 in the next week. And at first, Jake is like, well, how do I do that? If I knew how to make $1,000, I wouldn't be in this position. But basically, Clarence says, figure it out. And so Jake starts selling his textbooks, his old college economics textbooks, on an online auction site. And that's what I did 20 years ago, essentially. And then he realizes from there he can see what the other auctions are selling for, and then buying and selling, arbitrage, et cetera. So I mean, I have some experiences like that. And then the middle portion of the book takes place in Ethiopia, which the continent of Africa is very close and personal to me. And so Ethiopia is different from West Africa, but still some of that is there. That said, one of the things I've been hearing from some of the advanced readers, like some of the people who are on Side Hustle School, we sent them a copy of the book. They're saying that even if they are not like the main character, they're a different kind of person demographically, they can see themselves in that person. So a friend of mine, Shannon Mattern from Ohio, I think she said she's 41, 42. She's like, I'm a 41-year-old woman, and I connect very, very much, to Jake, the 28-year-old guy, because I was in a similar situation, and I was in a corporate environment like his, and I had to find my way out, and nobody was telling me what to do, but I eventually figured it out. So my hope is that it's relatable to really anybody who's experiencing some kind of struggle.
Oh, it's incredibly relatable as someone who's struggling to adapt to a changing world. We at CreativeLive, we stood up CreativeLive TV in just a week and are broadcasting live from the homes all over the place. Me personally, my wife Kate, who you know well, finally I got kicked off the living room table or the dining room table down into a spare bedroom downstairs. So there's a lot of change, and I think we're all trying to find a new normal. with respect, I want to go back to this, your writing of the book, because I think that process you talked about briefly, you put a lot of extra juice into this one, 8 revisions or something like that. I think that there's a lot to understand about anything when you uncover the process. So did the fact that you rewrote this 8 times instead of the 3 or 4 that you normally would in a nonfiction book, was that a signal of the amount of insight that you were trying to put in the book? Was it a factor of just being new and different? What was that extra work that you put in? I know when we're trying to learn new things, which is so much about, there's a big part of your book, Jake's trying to learn a new skill. And again, I like this meta narrative of, is this you learning a new skill, and are we going to see more fiction from you in the future?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the last thing. I really, really enjoyed it. I really liked it. So we'll see what happens next. But as for that work process, I think it's probably a combination of all those things you mentioned. I did get some really good input about it. I mean, definitely my agent and editor really kind of contributed some really sharp comments on the final drafts that I think made it a better process. So do want to acknowledge that. But I think what's interesting thing with fiction, just like a lot of other creative work, is there's lots of different ways you can do it. It's not like there's a one right way. You don't come to this is the 100% optimal path. So I think for me, it was just like, what is the best way? What is the best way for me to tell this story and to be proud of it, and to feel like I've found the right balance of entertainment and inspiration, where people could read it and just enjoy the story, while also learning something. Here's something I didn't want to do. I'll tell you this about process. I didn't want to include at the end of each chapter, hey, here's what you should have learned during this chapter, which is a common thing in books, the 3 bullet points at the end, which I always find kind of annoying, and I think I've done it before. But just to be transparent, it's like, you read the chapter and it's like, hey, here are the 3 things you should have learned in the chapter. Did you really learn them? Just want to make sure. Did you learn? Here it is again. So I don't have anything like that at all. It's meant to just be let's enjoy this experience. Let's immerse ourselves in this experience. But hopefully come away at the end being like, okay, now what am I going to do with my life next?
Amazing. If you're just joining us, or if you're watching on a different platform, as we're streaming this, not just here at CreativeLive, but we're pushing this to our social channels, some of Chris's, welcome, first of all. And I'm Chase Jarvis, the founder and CEO of CreativeLive, and have the very good fortune of talking to my dear friend Chris Guillebeau about his new book, The Money Tree. And anyone in the world, wherever you're hearing this right now, seeing it, whatever, you can pop over to creativelive.com/Chris. And that will allow you to view the page in CreativeLive, which will also allow you to join the chat here. And all you have to do is up in the upper right-hand corner, click Join Chat, and that will allow you to ask questions for the question and answer section, which is coming shortly here in the next, 20 minutes or so. I've already got a long queue of questions, but if you put your questions in there, we're monitoring them. I'm monitoring them, and we'll be happy to consider them. Okay, so away from process now, and a little bit more towards some of the lessons in the book. What I observed is that you pulled so many different aspects of your previous, I don't know how many, 6 books, 5, 6 books now, and this overlap. I want to go back to, I think it was in Born for this overlapping Venn diagram of, I think you called it money, flow, and
Joy.
Yeah. This area, these different pieces of our individual personalities, where we can find the thing that we're supposed to do. For those people, like Jake, who are comfortable in their job and want to have a side hustle. Can you walk us through that? That's still the most profound way for that I know of. I've adopted it. I always credit you, but just so you know. But just for the people right now who are saying, "Oh, cool! I'm bought into this idea. I want to have a side hustle. I just don't know how or where to look." So, can you coach us on that?
Yeah, there's a couple of things there. I mean, it's. I appreciate you saying you bought into it, but I actually think you were one of the inspirations for it when I was thinking about what is this trifecta and who is living it out. So the trifecta is as you said, joy, money, and flow, and these are the 3 elements that I think contribute to meaning and purpose, and some amount of happiness, but that's a different topic. So meaning and purpose, joy, it's like you're doing something that you love to do. You like doing something. It's not that you're passionate about 100% of aspects of everything that you do, your job and stuff, but overall it's like this is what you like. And money is this element of being sustainable, right? You're doing something that actually compensates you, because in the world that we live, we need money to exchange for other stuff. And then flow is this skill that you have that is just so sharp and something that you're really good at, maybe something that is easy to you, but other people find it difficult, something that you can just really immerse yourself in, and like, this is the work that I love to do. And I think when you find that, like, that is the goal. Like, we're all on this like journey to find it, and maybe you never reach it, right? But you're always trying to get closer and closer to the intersection between these three things. And in life, you can sometimes be satisfied with only two of them. And there can be some times that you go through a season where you're like, man, I actually need to really make some money right now. I don't care what it is. I don't have to be good at it. I don't have to love it. And then other times, it might be one of the others, but ultimately what we want is all three of those things. So as it like pertains to like, what is my side hustle? What is it that I'm going to choose? There's a number of exercises we can go through about identifying your skills and such, and what are the skills you have that are marketable? How are you going to transform those skills into a product or a service that we offer to people? But that's also about an intersection of, I really like to do this thing and it is valuable. It's not just both. It's not just one. It's like, I really like to do this thing and other people also find it marketable and valuable. I'm not just like doing something for myself. I'm doing something that is contributing in a way. And usually you can talk that through with people and help them kind of understand what the intersection is.
Amazing. I feel like I point to that book and to you, maybe not daily, but certainly weekly. It's just a really elegant answer to the question. There's this a theme in the book. I'm just going to grab one particular page here. Check how you say it. It's just being, I'm going to put it in slightly different words because you use it really eloquently in the book, but just you're more capable than you give yourself credit for. And it's a very powerful theme of the book. I see it in your work. The World Domination Summit to me is one of the most profound events that I've ever attended. This is where you bring thousands of people together to set world records and to just observe when some committed, hardworking people come together, what's possible. So for the folks at home, things like imposter syndrome, if you've arrived, self-doubt, just negative self-talk. I think I want to know, and I think it's a popular question. It's something that's getting talked about in the chat room right now. How do you have a prescription for overcoming that? How do you remedy it yourself? Talk to us about how you think about it.
I don't have a prescription or a remedy. It's something that coexists, for me, and I think for a lot of other creatives. It's not about like pushing through it or pretending that it's not there. It's more like, what is the higher value? So yes, I experience doubt and negative self-worth all the time. I've gone through a lot of stuff. I've talked about that a little bit. Just even like mental health issues and depression and anxiety. And I think people need to talk about that stuff more. So those things can be there, and at the same time, you have a desire to do something more. You have this aspiration. You have a feeling within yourself that you are meant for more, right? Like, there is more to life than this, whatever this is that's around you. And so in the book, that theme that you mentioned, like the way I explain it in the book is, you can do more than you think. And it's just a kind of recurring, mantra, recurring like slogan that's kind of presented. And that's certainly been the case in my life. Like, I never thought that I would go to every country in the world. I never thought that I'd be speaking to like all these people around the world. Not at all. I just did one thing. I did the thing that was in front of me. I think this is always good advice. Like, do the thing that's in front of you right now. If you have one small idea, don't worry about, don't criticize this idea or analyze it to death. Just do that thing. And if that leads you to something else, then do the next thing. And that's what I did with everything in terms of starting the blog 11 years ago. I said, I want to one day have 1,000 people that read my blog. That was what I wrote in the very first post of ChrisGuillebeau.com. And I said, maybe one day I want to write a book. Right? Like one book, And so now here we are. Now we get the summit, all the other stuff. And it's because I did the thing that was in front of me and kept doing that over and over and over. The last thing I want to say about imposter syndrome is, for that person out there who has that dream, that aspiration, that inkling, that sense, maybe you don't even know what it is. It's just a sense, it's just a sense, like, there's something more for me. I think if you don't pursue that thing, that's when you are being an imposter, because the real you, the authentic you, that's where that authenticity is, in pursuing that idea, even if you don't know where it leads, And if you choose to turn your back on that, then you are rejecting a big part of yourself. And you don't want to do that. So it's actually the true self that is, leading you towards saying yes, and it's the imposter that holds you back.
What are the biggest ways that people hold themselves back? I think it comes in lots of forms. And as someone who's, coached people online and written about that sort of extensively, even sometimes overtly, sometimes not so overtly, what are some of the biggest ways that you see in your community people not doubling down on their own self?
They focus on obstacles. They focus on limitations. They say, here are all the reasons why I can't do this. Oh, I would really like to do this, but this is in my way. I don't have access to this resource or this knowledge or, whatever it is. Like, I'm focusing on these obstacles. That's one way. So, the way around that is like to demolish the obstacles. So let's move this out of the way. Let's move. Oh, you don't have a lot of money. Okay, well, look at all these other people that did this. What can you do without spending a lot of money? In fact, you shouldn't spend money. So that's one thing. I think another thing is just extensive analysis. And I know, like, in certain worlds, I know finance and, like, in the startup world, like, validation and such is so important. But for a lot of people and a lot of projects, for doing the thing that's in front of them right now, they just need to do it. And I think research is often like a code word for avoidance. It's like, I need to do a bunch of research, but you're really just kind of putting something off. It's like research, avoidance. I'm going to go to graduate school. This is like, a way to defer 2 years of your life, to not make any decisions effectively. So anything you can do to not do that, I think is good.
I am typing that quote into the chat right now. Research is code word for avoidance. And if you haven't yet, now is a great time to order the book. For those watching, if you're on the class page or just there's about a third of the way down below the video window, there's a link to go check it out at Amazon. The book drops this coming Tuesday, but pre-orders mean a lot to authors. Right. And whether you can support your local bookstore and you know their URL wherever you might be, Powell's or Book People or wherever you are, that link is available right there in the middle of the page at creativelive.com/Chris. So I'm sure Chris would appreciate you picking up a copy.
Thank you.
Of course. I want to keep exploring this thread of obstacles. Part of the, I hear people list resources that they don't have. Money, I hear, time, I don't have enough friends, I don't have an audience to sell my thing to. For the people that see this, you talked about hurdles, but to me there's a whole bunch of things that are resources that the belief, like, oh, I don't have an investor.
Right.
So would you tell us a story of story time with Chris?
Great.
Would you tell us a story of how you started just one of your things, maybe WDS, and so we can actually get into the mind of the entrepreneur, because I'm guessing that you too lacked resources, and it'd be good to hear what you did.
Yeah, I think I want to tell a slightly different story than WDS, just because WDS is like a community gathering. It's a nonprofit. I love it, but I want to focus on like a money-making kind of example for somebody. So when I started writing my blog, The Art of Nonconformity, it was completely non-commercial. It was very poorly written. I had to just figure things out as I go. So your first blog is always going to be bad. Your first podcast, whatever it is, you got to get started. And it's all there. Like, people want to go back and look. It's it's still preserved. So it was all non-commercial. I did kind of vague and stuff. But at a certain point, I started writing about my travels and going to every country in the world. And a couple of times I would delve into some logistics about, here's how I booked this round the world plane ticket, because I was really into this thing called travel hacking. I was a geek about frequent flyer miles and mistake fares and round the world tickets. And there's a whole industry about that now. But 12 years ago it was much more nascent. And so I'd write a little bit about that, and I got a lot of questions. Like, people were asking me a lot, like disproportionate number of questions about this, and I was like, maybe there's something to this. And so, I started, creating some ebooks, not ebooks about parrots, but ebooks about, around the world travel and such. And I sold them like with a super soft sell. I had the softest sell possible. I was like, hey, I've got this thing, but don't worry, if you don't want to buy it, you don't have to buy it. It's okay, if it's really, if you're really interested in it, go here. And like the first one I put out, it was like I sold like $1,000 worth, and I was without trying to sell it, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I started just kind of like delving into that more, and ended up creating a membership site called the Travel Hacking Cartel that I operated for a number of years. It's now closed, but did that, and so the point there is, I paid attention to what people were recognizing and paid attention to what people were asking me, and I never really thought, I just didn't assume that would be a marketable area of expertise, but because people kept asking me. So I find a lot of stories actually on Side Hustle School come about because people's friends or colleagues or family, are asking them for something, right? They're asking them for knowledge or for a product. Or there was a woman in California who baked cheesecake and made enough cheesecake to pay for her college, like a lot of money, right? And it was because she made cheesecake for a while, and her friends, oh, this is really good. You should give it to give me one to take to work, and give me one. So she kind of just expanded from there. So paying attention to what people ask you, and it's like a recognizing you as an authority, and also expressing a demand.
And for anybody who's wondering about that travel hacking stuff, you've got 2 classes on CreativeLive.
That's right.
One, become a travel hacker, and the second, make your dream trip a reality. So if you go to that little, what is that, a magnifying glass on the CreativeLive site, and you type in Chris, G-U-I, just start typing your name will populate, and you can check out those classes. They are spectacular. So I want to go back a little bit now to this overlapping sort of 3 things and the story that you just told, because an element of both of those is creating for yourself, but listening to the market. And, it seems to me to be some alchemy rather than it's not necessarily science, and it's not just art,
right?
But there's this, what I perceive in you is just this strong sense of intuition, and then also an awareness of the community that you built around your products. Early Art of Nonconformity, the Travel Hacking Cartel. You talk about it so eloquently, but I think there's 2 really distinct ingredients there. So help us understand how you balance those 2 things.
So I really think intuition is probably, I don't know if I would say it's overrated, but it's more something that's developed. Like you gain intuition, it's not innate. You gain intuition by trial and error and experience, and by trying a bunch of stuff and seeing what doesn't work. Then maybe the next time you have a little bit more knowledge or awareness of what might work. So this is something that everybody can develop. This is not something that is bestowed upon special people. I often say that the most important skill people can develop if they're learning to spot entrepreneurial ideas is curiosity, which is really just a trait, but it's not something that is taught. But if you can develop your sense of observation and noticing problems and listening, as you said, and then the second part is taking action on that. Like if you're paying attention and taking action, you're going to go far in life. You're going to be able to do a lot of different stuff. So there's nothing special about this. There's nothing special. I think the other thing is that things are always changing over time, right? And the example that I used to give, I wrote about this in $100 Startup. This is really funny now because I said, you can't just follow any passion, right? Like there's lots of stuff that you might be good at, but nobody else is going to care about it. And I said, when I was 20, I was really into playing video games, and I was good at playing video games, very passionate, but nobody was coming along to give me a check and say, hey, Chris, go play video games or whatever. So it's like you fast forward, 20 years, and now people are actually getting paid to play video games.
Insane money. They're getting paid millions of dollars.
I know. Like
athletes.
I missed my calling, I think. So there's always something there.
So, but keep talking about that, because I feel like this is something that people don't get. Like, what does it mean to develop your curiosity? Keep going. Real life example, please.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, actually, let's talk about that. So the joke about the video games. So even though these people are getting paid, like we're talking about Twitch streamers or anybody else, to ostensibly play video games, really what they're doing, if you look at it and analyze it, like we've done on a couple of case studies on the podcast, they are community builders. And so it's not, in most cases, that they are better gamers than every other person on the planet. What they do is they spend a lot of time cultivating community and connection and chatting with people, and people are going to watch their streams because they have a sense of belonging and identity to it. That is what the value is. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. They think it's just the games or just the whatever it is. And so in this day and age, like now, people are asking, sometimes a question I get a lot is like, what are the opportunities right now? And people tend to think of practical stuff. They're like, well, I wish I had invested in, Zoom or some other, web conferencing thing, years ago. I wish I had started that hand sanitizer company I dreamed of when I was a kid. But I think what's more, to go deeper, people are looking for connection. They're looking for community. They're looking for that shared belonging and identity, however we can find it, since we are socially distancing and all that stuff right now. So that's the opportunity. So if you're trying to develop your curiosity, what can you do to contribute to one small part of that issue? Not solving the problem for the world, but what can you do with, the 5 people that you know, or your 50 friends on Facebook, or whatever it is.
You talk at length. You've already talked about it a little bit in our conversation and in your writing, is about the relentless willingness to just take the next step, not to see the whole staircase. Is there a world or is there a time in your life? We want to know that Chris isn't perfect.
Sure.
Was there a time where you told yourself a big story about how everything was going to go, and it went very differently than that?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's probably many times like that. I want to think about it for a second, so I give you a real answer. I mean, the situation that I'm in right now is a lot different than I expected, and in the sense that, like, on Monday I was supposed to be in San Francisco, and then LA and Chicago and Denver. Like, I have the whole itinerary memorized. I had 35 plane tickets booked, and hotels and venues and such. And so when I realized I had to postpone that, I was disappointed. I was sad. And then, about a day later, I was like, okay, I can't change it. This is obviously outside of my control. So if I just focus on that, I'm going to be miserable. It's like, there's a quote about, like, you're not sure what the key to being, happy is, but the key to being unhappy is to, like, try to control stuff that you can't, And I heard another quote the other day about, like, it's not the future that produces our anxiety, it's our attempt to control the future that produces anxiety. And so I had to, like, reframe and said, okay, I was going to do all this thing. What am I going to do now? So the commitment that I've made, I'm still kind of fleshing it out, but the commitment that I've made is, in April and May, I was going to be on the road, for all those 6 to 8 weeks. I'm going to spend the same amount of time that I was going to spend, speaking at events, every night. I'm going to spend the same amount of time just showing up and being present and doing live streaming and, doing meetings for people who are out of work or struggling, speaking to groups remotely, just being there, and all for free, right? Just trying to be present. And I think, that'll be interesting, right? Like, I'll be interesting to see what comes out of that, but it's not what I expected. It's definitely like a detour. And at the same time, like, there has to be a way forward.
Amazing. All right. And speaking, I loved how you took that question and applied it right now. I think it's so prescient, and to continue pulling on that thread. One of the things that we promised with this class, this global international book release that we're a part of right now, on the class page, you say, who is this event for? And it's for people who are working remotely for the first time. So can you give some specific advice to those people? Like, you wake up and you're like, okay, I'm used to going into the office and pulling my pants on and, combing my hair and going out. And now, people are getting dressed from here up.
Yep.
And,
right.
And we've got all kinds of different. So what would you, what info would you give to those working remotely for the first time?
Yeah, and there's that time of day, you've got the sunset and lunchtime, and sunrise, sunset, lunchtime, and then the time of day when you change from your morning pajamas to your evening pajamas. I think it's good to recognize that this is hard for some people. And, for some people, well, I think for everyone, it's a real opportunity. But there is a group of people that's, like, really excited about it. And, like, I've been asking my boss to work remotely for years. They've always said no, and now they have no choice, So they're really jumping into it. But I think a lot of people who are just more accustomed to an office environment or another environment with a lot of, like, in-person collaboration, people who might be more extroverted, then they are struggling a bit, and it's hard to adjust to the different routine and such. So, so big picture and then practical. Big picture is, see it as an opportunity. If you have extra time now for whatever reason, cut yourself some slack. Like, this is a hard time for everybody. So I do think it's okay to, like, watch some Netflix or eat some ice cream or whatever. Like, it's all right. But at the same time, like, again, ask yourself, what do I want to see come out of this time? How can I come out of this and like I started writing a book, or I started the podcast, or my side hustle, or the art thing I always wanted to do, or now I've got my music on SoundCloud, or whatever it is. Try to devote some time to that in that process. Maybe one thing practically is, if you're now working remotely and you have a full-time job still, but you're not required to work the same hours, you have certain things you have to get done, and maybe you have to show up for certain meetings, but you have some flexibility. This would be a great time to kind of figure out what are your ideal working hours. Because normally you've been going, from 9 to 5 or whatever the time period is. Now you have some flexibility. You may discover that you do your best work early in the morning, and then you need a longer break in the afternoon. You like to go back to things later, or something completely different. This can be really helpful to figure that out, and that can help you in your side hustle. It can help you in your day job. It can help you whatever else you do next.
Amazing. All right. Well, I've got a bunch more questions, but I'm aware that there's now so many questions accumulating in the chats all over the place that we need to get to some of those. So if you are ready, I would love to shift gears. And there's so many good questions coming in from far and wide. And there's a really cool sentiment that we are all in this together. Like this is, people from the corners of the globe asking questions, all of which are relevant. And I think it's important to acknowledge that we're in a unique time. You talked about it in your, how you're dealing with change and the story that you told yourself before versus, I think you called it reframing.
Yep.
So we've got people all over the world in the process of reframing. And the questions are myriad, so I want to cover a bunch of different aspects that relate to the book and everything that you've been writing about for the past decade. And because of the pandemic and the book tour, people are asking, did you actually think about postponing the whole thing? Was that an option for you? Or was there just a let's go forward? The book is so close, it's here, it's been printed. This is maybe a little insight in the mind of the entrepreneur. Like when you're faced with, it's usually not do you do the smart, easy thing or the dumb, hard thing? It's usually like, it's like, if I had to not use one hand, which would it be?
Right.
So how did you,
what
was part of your decision process?
Well, if we were going to postpone, when would we postpone to, right? We have no idea, when things will be different in some ways. And I mean, the tour, I do hope to be able to go back to that at a certain point. I don't know when that will be. But the good thing about a book is it's still available, in lots of different formats. I have an audiobook that I recorded. There's a digital version. People can order the print book from their local bookstore, as you said, or from Amazon or wherever else. So the message is relevant. It's timely, And so it's like, if I can overcome the business challenge of getting the message out during this time, then I do think it will help people. So no, I never thought about really pushing it back. And also, to be fair, it's not entirely up to me. I'm working with, publishing partners, and they have calendars and such. So I think the best thing to do is accept that part is out of your control. The book comes out ready or not at this time, and it's actually good for me to have deadlines. I would say also as a creative and somebody who works independently, if I was self-publishing my own stuff, I might push back the book every time. Even when there's not a pandemic. It's like, another 2 weeks would be great, another 2 months, but because I have the publishing relationships I can't do that, and that's probably good.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. That question was from Sion.
Thanks.
So there's a interesting discussion going on. It's got its own thread. Nadia and Pamela are talking about considerations for what other people think about either your business idea or you writing a fiction book for the first time. Talk to us about how to manage the pressures that we feel culturally to do a certain thing, be a certain way. You opened with largely looking at ways to be unconventional, to break rules, and so reconcile all that stuff for us. And how should we think about the incoming pressures or ideas that everybody else has for our one precious life?
Yeah, I think the ideal, and I say ideal because it's hard to live up to, but I think the ideal to understand is, what other people think about you is none of your business, basically, right? This shouldn't affect what you are doing. And again, I know it's hard, but if you keep that present, then that can be a little bit helpful. Ultimately, I think of it the same way I think about fear or anything that I am afraid of, anything that is holding you back in terms of that inhibition or insecurity, of which I have a lot. I try to think of it as, this is here, this is present, and here's what I want to do. And am I going to allow the fear or the insecurity or what people think or their projections on me, the issues that they have that they are expressing in their comments or their judgment of me, am I going to actually let that prevent me from moving forward on something that is important to me? I think you have to remember that about projections. Like oftentimes when somebody's doing something new, they're starting a new project or going in a different direction or making a shift in their life, that can be uncomfortable. That can be uncomfortable to the people around them, because sometimes they look at what that person's doing and they're like, they have a sense of envy, actually. Like they're like, I want to do that, but I didn't make that choice, And so what happens in the end often is they come around. Some of the people who are a little bit judgmental or critical, they see what you have done with it, and they're like, okay, maybe that's it. So you're a role model in that way. You have to just move past it. Don't pretend it's not there, but you have to just let your decision, like your goals and your the course that you chart, lead the way.
Amazing. I want to invite you to tweak your mic a little bit.
Oh, so thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. It's just a little more toward you. There you go.
Sorry.
That's all good. Hannah asks a very practical question. Hey, how do I get that free book that you mentioned?
So we're building an online book registry at moneytreebook.com. It's not ready yet, but it will be ready very soon. So keep checking back within the next week. It should be up. Moneytreebook.com.
Yeah, and for the people who joined late or missed that part of your presentation, can you recap that for us?
Yes, of course. So we're building the first ever blockchain-enabled book registry that will allow book donors, to connect with anybody who's in a situation of financial struggle and would like to read the book, but can't get it for whatever reason. So if you're in either group, you'll be able to come and you can register to receive a book, or you can choose to buy copies of the book for these people. And we just like the idea of an experiment of seeing like what kind of goodness can we create from this, and maybe nothing will come of it, but maybe something really big will come of it. So it's one of those risks like we talked about earlier.
Awesome. Thank you. Chris Hope wants to know, are you doing some workshops on this? I'm guessing it's probably like you want to make sure to get the book out there, but is that something that you have in mind, or where's the best place for people to tap into the community that you're building around this new book?
Yes. I'm going to be doing stuff every single day. I'm going to be doing a daily Instagram Live. You can follow me at 193 Countries. I'm going to be starting a new series that I think will actually be on YouTube. I haven't announced it yet, but I just did, so it will be there. And that's going to focus specifically on finding opportunities in the time of uncertainty. I'm going to be doing some other live streams. You can follow me at chrisguillebeau.com. Anything I announce will be there or on my Twitter or Instagram.
Awesome. I know Chris and lots of other people in the chat room are going to be happy to hear about that. So Anna wants to know, how do the people in your book and the people that are in your community create processes to increase sales or grow their business? That's my little insert.
Okay.
Without burning out, because there's so much to be done.
Sure.
Anna P wants to know that.
Yeah, great question, Anna. So this is the kind of thing that we could spend a lot of time on and delve into the specifics of your business, because some of it may relate to that. But I would say big picture, there are so many things that can be done, and you won't be able to do all the things. And in fact, trying to do all the things is always a mistake, always a mistake. But it's especially a mistake for anybody who's really busy and has a day job and has other responsibilities. And those people are actually my market. Like when I started the podcast, I was like, I'm making this for busy people, who don't have 40 hours a week to spend on their project or whatever. And so when you have that limitation, that constraint, that can actually be helpful, because you realize I can't try every single strategy. I can't be on every different social network. I can probably be on 2, maybe. I could be on 2 and do a good job with that. So I think imposing these constraints is good. And then as for increasing sales, well, you're probably trying a bunch of different stuff depending on what your business is. And I think it's important to pay attention to what's working and then just do more of that. And just do more of what is working. Like figure out, okay, if this is the thing that's bringing in, if it's a classic 80-20 rule, it really does apply in this kind of market and with side hustles. Wherever things are working, do more of that. Ask if there's a way to create an extension of your product or your service. If you have a product, is there a way to provide a service around it? Or if you have a service, is there a way to provide a product around it? Those are a couple of things, and there's a lot more, but that's where I would start.
Amazing. Mary Ellen wants to know, have you always had this sense of curiosity and abundance instead of asking questions, quitting early, thinking in a scarcity mindset? Is this a learned thing or is this a trait?
What was that person's name? I'm sorry.
This is Mary Ellen.
Mary Ellen, thank you for asking that question. That's a beautiful question. I think I have, so there were two parts to it. One was the curiosity, and the other was the
Just the curiosity, abundance versus
right.
scarcity.
Okay, great.
So is this a
Yes.
trait, or is this something that you taught yourself or learned?
I don't think I ever consciously taught myself anything. I think I just experimented. I think I was always curious to a degree. I had, like a range of early experiences including being a juvenile delinquent and dropping out of high school, and a whole bunch of other stuff that came after that. Not to say that that's like the formative experience everyone should aim for, but I also don't regret any of it. So I think I always had the curiosity, but I really liked what she said about abundance, because I do try to have that mindset now, and I don't think I always did. I think if the opposite of abundance is scarcity, I think there are a lot of times in my life that I kind of live from that model of, a zero-sum game, or, if somebody else is winning, then I am losing, or comparison, to other people's success and such. So that's something I've been trying to work on. I think you kind of just grow with it as you go. The beautiful thing about this kind of work, whether it's the kind of work that like I'm doing and what Chase is doing in terms of creative work, or if it's just some, one of these like random side hustles that I talked about, with both of them, competition really isn't a factor so much. It's like there's room for lots of people to do lots of things. Somebody could go out tomorrow and start competing with the parrot behavioral ebook seller, and she would still be selling ebooks about parrot behavioral modification. So I think understanding that the best thing you can do for yourself is like, what is next for me? Not what is somebody else doing. Like I try not to pay attention to that stuff. I don't read my book reviews. I don't look at, metrics and stats and stuff like that. I just try to focus on what's in front of me now.
Amazing. Hey, can you talk a little bit more about the book you have coming out in the fall?
The book I have coming out in the fall. I haven't actually started work on that. The entire work that I've done with that is, get this mock-up of the cover, which I do want to say shout out to my friends Katya and Anna in Mexico City for doing that cover design for me this morning.
We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, see, I forgot earlier when we were talking about money, flow, joy. Mm-hmm. I framed that as my own question because I get a lot of questions about it, but it was also, I want to give a shout out to Cece who asked that question in the chat. That reminds me of another very powerful framework that you have, which is how to know when to quit. How to know when something's not working, because there's people in the chat rooms and there are people tuned in today who, hey man, I don't know. I've been doing this for a long time, and here I am. And if I thought it was hard before, now we're in the middle of a pandemic, and so give those folks some advice.
Yeah. We like to talk about this from different times. I think so. First of all, I'm a big fan of encouraging people to quit. I'm a big fan of encouraging people to give up on stuff that is not working or is just not, not the thing they're supposed to be doing now, or not what they are enjoying. And I feel like this is not said enough just from the top down. I feel like people are always talking about, just keep going, just keep trying, just persist. And that's terrible advice for so many people in so many situations. Think about that example of the flight attendant. Is that person just supposed to keep, writing to more and more airlines, trying to get a better job? Or are they going to be better served by doing something different? I think every person watching is like, they need to, if they really want to get ahead and get out of this situation they're facing, they need to do something different. So big picture, big fan of giving up on stuff. Nothing wrong with that. I think what you're talking about, Chase, is so if you're in a situation where you can't decide, like I've got the project, is it, do I keep going with it? Do I try something else? I'm indecisive. Then the kind of rubric or the model that we look at is just a very simple two-part question. First of all, is it working? And second, do you still enjoy it? And if something is working and you enjoy it, you don't even have to ask that question. If it's not working anymore and you don't enjoy it, then you stop and you do something else. Like, that's the easiest thing. And you only have to do more analysis if the answers are in conflict. And so if something is not working but you still like it, then you have to acknowledge reality. And you have to say, this is how things are. I can't just pretend. If I'm in the cruise industry right now, I can't just pretend that next week is going to be a great week, because it's not. So I have to change something because it's not working, but maybe there is a way to reframe or regroup. And then the other way is like, if it's actually working great, but you don't love it, well, life is short. One way or another, you're going to have to make a change at some point, or you will be miserable if you just keep doing something you don't like.
So eloquent. It's just like a scalpel. It cuts right to the important stuff so fast. Thank you for sharing that,
Thank you.
Chris.
Thank you.
Crystal M wants to know, is the money tree appropriate for teens and or tweens?
I think it is, actually. I think it is. I actually had a number of teens and tween readers in the advanced reading group. And so obviously they will be the judge of that, but I wouldn't hesitate to recommend it.
Lila wants to know, how do we get notified when this registry that we talked about earlier is up? We can think of a bunch of friends who need it in these tough times.
Yes. How do you get notified? I don't have a notification system for it just yet, but I promise it will be on moneytreebook.com. Likely within the next week if you're watching live. If you're watching later, it may already be there. It will be very obvious when it's there. I will announce it in all of my social channels and on my blog. So if you follow me on any of those places, this will be a very big deal. This is not like a small project. This is something we're going to make a major push for.
Got it. And just to recap, on the backside of that, your social handles are at 193 countries. And Chris Guillebeau, where do you remember where you are either on?
Do I remember where I am? Yes. It's a struggle, but I try. Yes, 193 countries on Instagram, and all the others are Chris Guillebeau.
Okay, great. Thank you. I guess that's a selfish question there, because I'm like, man, I know he's some on this, and
yes.
But also the moneytreebook.com is
Yes.
a great place. Maria Bovin de Labe wants to know, first of all, she's very happy to be here and wants to thank you for doing this virtually, because so many people don't get to see you in person even when you are on tour.
Mm-hmm,
so
that's true.
Big shout out and a thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
And she would love to hear your thoughts on platforms like Patreon.
Platforms like Patreon, for those who aren't familiar, where a creator can, offer their work to subscribers or fans, and fans can support them. I think it can work if you have enough of a following. I think it's hard sometimes when people are just getting going and they try to do a Patreon because they're not going to get a lot of support there. So, the opposite of Patreon, not the opposite, but the other approach is developing some kind of product or service or just a subscription that you offer on your own. So it's not like I'm for or against, those platforms per se. I think they are a good fit for some people.
Great. Anna wants to ask the question. Tried a lot of ideas in Chris's world. She said she's a designer. She's tried things like Etsy, Society6. They're working, but they don't really work. And she's wondering, what's the best place to find guidance where I don't have to spend $1 to $2K on a course? And I'm going to take a second and say, a subscription to CreativeLive is like $200, $150.
There
Like,
you go.
there's 2,000 classes there.
Right.
But that's my hijacking. This is really for you. Like, what's the community aspect? How would you steer her towards a bunch of like-minded people who also might be struggling? Of course, in your orbit, but is there some outside sources, or what would you recommend to Anna?
Yeah. So two things. One, three things. Be sure you subscribe to CreativeLive. Side Hustle School, my podcast, 1,200 episodes. They're 10 minutes long. They're designed for busy people, and every single one, different case study model, including a number of people who have been successful on Etsy and other platforms like that. Usually the key with Etsy is there's a lot of people selling the same thing. There's a lot of commodity sales. Even if it's art, they're very, very similar. And so the people we've seen who end up doing well on Etsy, like I actually had a story about a woman who was doing some really creative lighting sales on Etsy and ended up making her own website, now has a retail store in Chicago that has become like $1 million business, but started on Etsy. It's usually because they are doing something different, they are standing out, and they have found a really creative way to do it. As for some of the other ones that you mentioned, I think those are platforms, I call them starter platforms, because they are good for somebody who's never done anything like this. It can be very validating to go and list something for sale on Etsy or eBay or anywhere else, and then it sells even for a small amount of money, because that validation just kind of is like, oh, empowering. I can do something else with this. But it's not always a great thing to build your business on those platforms because it is hyper competitive and saturated, and because that platform is controlling access to your buyers and your browsers and all of that. So ultimately, I think it's better to actually build away from that. And as for what's best, I mean, that kind of depends on your specific design skills, what you are trying to offer to people.
Awesome. Speaking of podcasts, Dave D wants to say thank you. Just discovered it. I'm wondering if you can give us a little more color on the podcast. It's every day.
Yes.
Which is
SideHustleSchool.com.
totally bonkers.
SideHustleSchool.com or in Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Castbox, wherever you get your podcasts. And it is a collection of stories and question and answer and dialogue with people that is designed to be very short and bite-sized. And my favorite thing is when people discover it and go back and listen to the entire archive, which even as the creator of it, I think is kind of insane now that there's so many episodes. But I hear from people that are going on road trips, like across the U.S. or Canada or elsewhere, and they're like, I listened to you from this state all the way to this state. And I'm like, I wouldn't want to listen to myself from this state to that state, but I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Awesome. Thank you. Sydney wants to know, do you have advice for young adults/teenagers who want to dive into their own startups?
Great question, Sydney. I'm not sure my advice is much different. I think if you're in that place, then you have access to a lot of the same stuff that a lot of the people that I've featured. Like, you don't have access to a lot of money, which I assume, but that's good. Somebody else asked me the other day, here's an example of like a question with incorrect thinking. Someone said, I have $5,000. Is that enough to start my side hustle? And my response is, that's actually too much, probably. I mean, it depends on what you want to do, right? But the question is not, I have this much money, how can I do it? So if you're a teenager or a kid, I've actually had a lot of stories of kids and teenagers on the podcast, people doing some really interesting stuff.
Fantastic. Thank you. This is either Jan or Jan. I don't know what country this is coming in from, but wants to talk about the process of writing. I'm guessing this person might be interested in writing their own book or writing a blog. You talked about having publishers and whatnot, but Jan or Jan wants to know, did you have someone help you with the process of editing the book?
Well, I'm fortunate to have an editor, and that's what the editor does. But I do all the outlining and drafting and writing myself, and then I get feedback from them and go back and do it some more and such. So even if you're not working with a traditional publisher, I think it's very helpful to get advice from a person who actually is a professional editor, not just your friend who has some comments. Those may be valid comments as well. But I think it's really helpful to kind of go through that process of getting constructive feedback.
Justine wants to say, Justine B., Chris, your dry sense of humor gives me life. So thank you. Yeah, I agree. Like, your personality, your sense of humor
Justine.
is unmatched.
Thank you. You're awesome.
There's a couple questions about the World Domination Summit.
Oh, cool.
Can you fill us in on the latest, the status of the
Yes.
of WDS?
Great. So World Domination Summit, for those who don't know, it's this gathering we've been doing every summer in Portland, Oregon, for awesome, remarkable people such as those who are watching or listening now. Chase has been with us at least 2 or 3 years, I believe. And so we've been going for 10 years. We have main stage keynotes like Chase Jarvis and others. We have lots of little workshops and breakouts, meetups and parties and such. And this was going to be our 10th and final year. We announced last year we've done 10 years. We wanted to actually end well rather than keep on going forever. But like so many other things in this world that we're in, we are postponing. So it is postponed, not canceled. We are now going to do it in the summer of 2021. So WDS 2020 will be held in June 2021. You can go to worlddominationsummit.com to learn more.
You're going to still call it the World Domination Summit 2020?
TBD. Fortunately, we learned a long time ago to not print the date on any of the swag or anything else that we print, so that's good. But we will see.
Laura R. wants to know, all these new technologies that are available to us are wonderful, but how does anyone possibly keep up? Doesn't that make finding your target audience more difficult?
I do not try to keep up. I mean, I don't know what you think. What's your answer to that, Chase?
Trying to keep up is, it's a fool's errand, right?
Yes.
It's just, I like to, this is where that part, intuition, like what feels good to you.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, to me, you work really hard and essentially you're putting blinders on, and every once in a while come up to see if there's anything new that you can incorporate. But if you're always looking over your shoulder, it's bad for your neck. First of all, you need to be focused, and that's one of the reasons that horses have blinders. I think they work great for people too. It's one of the your focus and your attention is arguably the most powerful thing you have, whether you're placing it on a person that you care for or your business. Attention is everything. So to me, getting distracted with the next new platform and technology, and it doesn't work for most. But this question was for you. You kicked it over to me, Chris. But
I have the same answer, though. I mean, I have basically the same answer. As there's so much that I don't keep up with, and so much that I don't do well. So it's not even a question of keeping up. There's a lot of stuff I don't do well because of the structure that I have. I don't have a lot of employees. I'm fortunate to work with a few people, but I don't, I'm not a good manager. I don't want to create a company. And so as a consequence of that, there's a lot of stuff that I just can't do or can't do well, and I've accepted that. I try to focus on what I'm good at, what's in front of me, what my goals are and such. And there's a lot of platforms or networks that I'm not on. There's a lot of stuff other people do really, really well that I respect, and I look at them and I'm like, that's cool. I wish I could do that. But to do that, I would need to have, built something different or to make different choices in my life. So ultimately, a lot of what I do is what is the life that I want to live? How is my life and work integrated or aligned in that way? And so I would say, the question is, how do I keep up? Don't try to keep up. That is a fool's errand, to use Chase's phrase.
Someone smarter than me said that. I'm ripping that off
for
just
sure. Claim it. It's okay.
Okay, great, perfect. Brenda wants to know about creating online courses using Teachable. Is there a better platform? What do you recommend? Any ideas you can offer?
There are a lot of platforms out there. I don't know that there is a best platform. The best It's kind of like, Chase, what is it you say about the camera? Like, the best camera is the one that you have, right? Yep. If you like Teachable or another one, then that's great. I think with the question, what's your content? What are you teaching? What are you hoping to get out to people? And then how do you match the platform to that? There are many.
Awesome. It has been brought to my attention that it's your birthday.
It is not my birthday, but it will be soon. But thank you.
The internet says it's your birthday on your Wikipedia page.
Yes, the internet is advanced in time. The internet is 3 days early.
Okay.
So
you do the math, and then everyone who's on this broadcast, go wish Chris.
But you can wish me a happy birthday still. I appreciate it. Thank you.
People are wishing you a happy birthday.
Thank you.
Surprise.
Thank you.
So Kevin was asking about one more follow-up on WDS. You've postponed it, but I thought it was sold out. But so what's the status now? Will there be more tickets, or should the people who didn't get in just fold their hands and go pout in the corner?
I don't think they should pout in the corner, but we don't really have an announcement for that yet. Right now, it's just kind of we just made this decision to postpone, or the decision was effectively made for us, of course. So there's a lot of stuff that we have to figure out on our end. But if you go to worlddominationsummit.com, that's where we'll have any future announcement.
Awesome. Dana, this question is from Dana. We're going rapid fire here because I'm aware of our time. Okay. I know we need to get you onto your next event, but Dana wants to know. It's back to the point we touched on earlier, but Dana comes at it from a slightly different way, which is just these outside pressures. When you first start out, if you don't have friends who are entrepreneurs or others who have side hustles, you tend to get a lot of, hey, don't quit your job, or you can't make money that way. How do you let that affect you? Or where would you, and thing one, how do you let it affect you? And then thing two, where do you turn to get different advice?
So first of all, I don't always tell people to quit their job. I mean, a lot of what I encourage people to do is, in whatever situation you are in life, what can you do to start creating more economic security for yourself so that you have the option to do something different in the future? So it's not so much about walking away from your job right away, but still, I understand what you mean about the pressure of somebody, you can't make money doing this or whatever. So maybe two things. One, even if those people are your friends, you don't necessarily have to get counsel or advice from them. If they are negative, you can just kind of do your own thing. Also, even if they are your friends, maybe you need some new friends as well, in addition, or in place of. That's for you to decide. So in this time that we're in now, it's really interesting because people are connecting virtually and digitally in so many different ways and forums. And I would say start watching more CreativeLive. Start hanging out in other groups. Like what other meetings can you go to? What other communities can you find and such? And one way or another, you need to find people who are supportive of your goals and dreams. I think even like just watching this, if you can see in the chat and other people that are here, you can tell that there are other people like who see the world in the same way, who have the same values. So understand that you're not alone. It is different than when I was working for myself 20 years ago. I didn't know a lot of people, as I said, who were doing it. Even though some were, but we were all kind of isolated. But now, there are a lot of people just, asking different questions and trying different stuff. So you're definitely not alone.
Awesome. I'm trying to get through as many questions
I need to
as
go
possible.
faster. Sorry.
No, actually, people are loving the long answers. And so it's my job to make sure that the right questions get asked. You just go ahead and do the answer that you want to provide. Nadia asks, well, first of all, it's a comment. Chris, you have such a lovely message. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadia.
The second is, do you struggle as someone who helps others so much to set boundaries for yourself?
I do. Sure. I often feel really guilty or bad, or I don't know what the word is, probably something more eloquent than that, because I'm frequently behind in getting back to people. And people will contact me about stuff, and then I'm negligent in replying because of all this other stuff I'm trying to do. And I don't like that. It's like a constant struggle, and I haven't really found the answer because I don't want to like put boundaries that say like you can't contact me or whatever. Like I'm too busy to respond to your email. I'm very kind of offended by that in a way. And at the same time, it's like the reality of like I can't spend 12 hours a day just doing emails or whatever. So it's I don't know. It's a struggle. I don't have the full answer for it.
Well, you do a pretty good job of scaling your advice and help and communication, writing books, whatnot. Your daily podcast. As someone who has a podcast of their own, and the fact that you do yours daily, I feel like just shame emoji.
CreativeLive is streaming every day, multiple classes.
For sure, but that's a lot of people signed up to help contribute to that. There's a whole team behind the scenes, but it's just such a valuable resource. And there were some other questions about that, and you all know where to go get that wherever you get podcasts or at sidehustleschool.com.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of side hustles, Dwayne wants to know, are there side hustle groups out here in the world, like in Los Angeles? And this is a recurring question. We've got other people want to know how to get together with other side hustlers. Yeah,
we actually have had, to go back to World Domination Summit, we've had WDS, WDS local groups meeting in different cities, some more active than others, and a lot of people there are side hustling, so that's one opportunity. And if it works out, I would love to start money tree reading groups in different cities, which doesn't have to be all about the book. That's just kind of like that's the structure of the organization of it. But everybody in the book, or everybody who comes to that, is trying to pursue this third way model. In the book itself, there's a lot of conversation about this group that meets. And so my hope is that if the book does well enough, like we have to reach enough people with it. But if it does well enough, then we can start those groups in lots of different cities, and that would also be free and just available to everybody who wants to participate.
Awesome. There's such a thriving community here in the chat. We've got people from Canada. I've mentioned before, a global audience.
Awesome.
And that is a great transition to Dennis Garrick's question. How do we continue this conversation after the event? I know Chris has to go home at some point, but how do we continue the conversation? What's your answer to that? Of course, there's community here in this chat room, but where would you steer them? Because I'm going to do the selling for you here for a second. Of course,
thank you.
There's so much community around here, and the book. If you Google this thing and you cross-reference this in any of Chris's channels, if I know one thing about Chris besides his being an amazing human is too, he does a better job of creating community than 99.9% of the people who've ever set foot on the internet. So you can be sure there will be something. I'm guessing that in the middle of your launch week that that there's a bunch going on, but what is maybe you can shape it into for Dennis Garrick, what's the long-term vision of where people will aggregate around the ideas that you share in the money tree?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you for asking that. I think maybe so. I touched on this very briefly earlier, but let's do it. Let's do it live, right? So I do want to start this YouTube channel in which I'm going to be streaming and answering questions. Like this on a regular basis, and I'm hoping to do that very soon. So if you, I don't actually have anything up yet, but if you look this week at youtube.com/Chris Guillebeau, I'm going to announce that, and there'll be a regular time for it, and people can converse and chat and so on. So that's my thing. Details to come. But as for the long term, I don't know. I want this to be an interaction in the sense that all my greatest stuff that I've ever been part of, it's been one part of me and then one part what other people bring. It's like I have an idea and I'm putting it forward, but then somebody else comes along and makes it better, whether it's through WDS or the book or the podcast or anything. So I think I'm kind of observing it all as it goes as well.
Well, Laura and Hiro Nashimura, Laura says, I would love to host one of these discussion groups.
Okay,
Hiro is Side Hustle School.
Amazing.
And all your books have helped me start side hustling. And Hiro quit the corporate job last summer as a 30th birthday present. And
Wow.
it's big,
Awesome.
yeah, big shout out to you.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Dwayne has a quick question that I want to get in before because I've seen it pop up from a couple of others. This getting investment in your side hustle. I'm offering that up because
Sure.
I think I know your response, but because a couple of people who've talked about it, Dwayne's question is specifically on how do you say what the ROI is going to be, but I just wanted to get your
Sure.
overall impression on getting investment.
Yeah, no, Dwayne, thank you for the question. So I try not to answer questions that I'm not qualified to answer. And I have no idea how you get investment capital for your business because I have never done that for myself, nor do I want to. Nor do 99% of all the different people that I've talked about in 1,200 episodes of the podcast or in my 7 books. They don't do that. They don't want that. Like they're deliberately trying not to do that. And obviously there are some businesses that need that. Like this is not a universal critique of every business in the world. It depends on what you're trying to do. Like if you're trying to start a major manufacturing business, create some new semiconductor technology or whatever, then maybe you need investment. Maybe there's probably somebody else you can go and listen to, to give good advice about that. I'm trying to reach people who don't want to go that path. They just want to do something for themselves. They want to start quickly. They want to start in the next 30 days. They need to make some extra money, or they want to build the security or new future for themselves without necessarily trying to have a company with hundreds of employees or whatever. So those are my people, and that's kind of the need that I speak to.
Well, speak to it elegantly, you do. Spoken like Yoda. There's just such an outpouring of gratitude and love and support and encouragement. Congratulations on the new book. If you tuned in late, we're here talking with Chris Guillebeau about his new book, The Money Tree, which pre-orders are on right now, and that's a great way to help Chris is to press the button. If you're on the CreativeLive class page, or if you're watching on Facebook, go to creativelive.com/Chris, and there's a great big picture of the book right there. That'll take you to a place where you can buy the book. You mentioned all the different formats earlier, Chris, that you can get some of these delivered instantaneously via things like Kindle and audiobook, but take it from me, the physical book is gorgeous as well. I enjoyed it. I dog-eared the crap out of it. It has been such a joy and a treat to have you here on Creative Live, Chris. You're always welcome. So grateful for sharing your vision and wisdom with us, specifically around money and having additional side income, because we're in an uncertain world and we don't want to pretend that that doesn't exist. So thank you so much. But before we go, is there anything else that you'd want to close with? Any ideas that you have to share with us that we might not have covered?
No, I mean, we covered a lot. This is a wonderful conversation. Just very grateful for it. Every time I do this and, hear the comments in the chat, it just reminds me I feel really fortunate that I can write books and speak to amazing people such as those who are watching right now. So thank you, Chase. Thank you, Creative Live. And thank you, everybody who's been watching.
Dee Dee, Brenda, Dwayne, Andrew, Hiro, Laura, Brenda, Leela, Lila, Dwayne, Pat, Maria, all saying thank you from the corners of the globe.
Thank
and happy birthday upcoming here in just a couple of days. All right. Thanks so much, Chris. Again, I'm Chase Jarvis, the founder and CEO of Creative Live. I want to say thank you so much for watching. In addition to the Money Tree, of course, Chris has several courses on our platform. We look up to, admire, and respect this guy so much. If you are new to Creative Live, we hope you've enjoyed the show. Chris gave you a lot of information. You can rewatch this broadcast for free on this page here ongoing. So if you're just tuning in now and you're like, wait a minute, I missed it, it will be reposted soon. So don't feel like you've missed out. And again, Chris is always welcome here, and so are you. So thanks very much for tuning in. Signing off from Seattle, and stay safe out there wherever you are. Thanks so much for joining.